Welcome. I'm Terry Scott, National Executive Vice President, here with National President Doreen Greenwald, and we want to thank you for joining us this evening. Based on the many RSVPs and questions submitted, it's evident that you two are just as concerned as we are about the current state of the federal workforce, about the attacks being levied against us, and about what we can all do to fight back. We had over 10,000 union members to RSVP and over 5,000 questions submitted. And that's a good thing. And if you know of any member who, for whatever reason, cannot attend this session, let them know that it'll be recorded and then shared on the members only section of our website. Now, this is a virtual town hall. This is new. But Doreen and I, we're always searching for ways to get more people involved and engaged. But please understand this. This fight that we're in, all of us must get involved and take action. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. So as Terry said, this is our first virtual town hall of this nature. And I am really thrilled to hear that we have such great attendance to this. So as Terry said, I think right before we came on the air here, we're at almost 12,000 people that signed up to participate. And we'll have well over 6,000 questions. Now, the format tonight is going to be that of going through some themes that the questions came in as. Obviously, in the limited time that we have, we're not going to be able to get through each individual question. So we did our best to really pick out many of the themes that people submitted so that you get a sense of the information and walk away with some good knowledge after tonight. We're also going to be looking at different ways that we can come back to you and have additional conversations as more information becomes available. So first, I'd like to give a shout out to our chapters, our chapter presidents, our chapter leaders, and all the members out there. You are NTEU, and because of you, we are able to provide the great fight that we are with this administration attacking federal workers. We also have a wonderful NTEU staff that is busy and engaged in this fight. And so as we go into the details tonight, I want you to know that NTEU is here to represent you. You are a member of a union because nobody fights alone. And with NTEU, you are never alone in this fight. So let's get started.
Thank you, Doreen. Our first category deals with probationary employees. Now, we received a variety of questions concerning probationary employees, so here's just a few. Does NTEU have any updates on institutional grievances, actions at the Office of Special Counsel, or Merit System Protection Board to get probationary employees reinstated?
That's a great question, Terry. As you know, at the beginning of this year, after the administration took office, we saw something we've never seen before, and that was the mass firing of probationary employees. And they were fired not for performance and not for conduct, which is what you would normally see in a probationary employee's initial year or two, depending on how they were hired. Normally, you would expect somebody to be removed if they're not performing well in the position or something came up in a background investigation. Instead, the administration took actions across the government to remove thousands of probationary employees. And so NTEU immediately got involved and filed a lawsuit because we believe these actions to be illegal. And I'm pleased to report that there's a number of lawsuits out there, and the judges have found that these actions were illegal. And in many cases, the judge has ordered that probationary employees be returned to work. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is that agencies have moved to put probationary employees on what is called administrative leave. That is not back to work, as we understand it, and we would like to see employees back at work. What agencies have told us is they've had to put them on administrative leave because that is faster to get them back on the rolls. Obviously, getting them back in a paid status, having the ability to be covered by insurance and things is critical to probationary employees. So we're happy to see that progress. Obviously, we have also filed institutional grievances on the behalf of the terminated probationary employees. We also saw an NTEU put out to all of our members information about what probationary employees should do. So back in late February, we provided step-by-step information about what terminated probationary employees' steps they could take. That included filing with the MSPB, and we recommended a group, James and Hoffman. We also gave information about the Office of Special Counsel, OSC, and that's a group called Alden Law Group. And so I encourage you, if you have questions about that, you can take a look on our website and get that information. But right now, the status is they're bringing them back to work. And we want them to be back at work because they're valuable to the organizations.
Great news. Second question. Why is NTEU using member-provided resources to defend probationary employees?
So I get that question. You know, resources are limited, and so unions are always cautious about how we spend money. But in this case, as I opened, probationary employees usually have very limited rights if they're removed individually based on performance or conduct. But what we saw here was unprecedented. Thousands of employees removed through no fault of their own. And so as a union, when somebody's rights are violated, when the law is broken, we take action. And so this union, as well as other unions, took action. And based on the court's results, I think we were right. You know, they're bringing folks back. So I think those resources are well spent, and we're going to continue to use our resources to stand up and fight for our members.
Awesome. Now, regarding the probationary employees, are we keeping them on our rolls?
You know, good question, because sometimes when employees are terminated, if they don't stay as a member, they fall off our rolls. Because of the work that we're doing in support of the probationary employees and their illegal termination, we are keeping them on our rolls. Regardless if we're getting dues from them right now, we've determined that they will stay on our rolls so that we can keep in touch with them as things change. They have committed to us to be members, and we are committed to keeping them informed and up to date. And so that's the best way to do it. If we have their information in their email, we can continue to send them information. So yes, they will stay on our rolls.
That's good news. Now, our next category is reduction in force. The first question, when the current administration does not reach its target number in reduction of the federal workforce through resignation or retirement, what will be the next course of action?
Excellent question. I think we've all been watching the news and following what this administration wants, and it wants to gut the government. It is looking to remove federal employees, shrink it, and so likely we see the next action is going to be a reduction in force or a RIF. And that's concerning to all members, all federal employees, all agencies. First and foremost, we oppose a RIF. And I have been sending letters to NTEU represented agencies, reminding of them of their obligations should they enter a RIF, and also pushing them to use the obligations in our contract, which basically forces them to limit a RIF and only use it under most necessary circumstances. Quite frankly, we've seen zero evidence that a RIF is even necessary. Many of these agencies, before this administration took office, were desperately seeking to hire employees so that they were able to do their mission. And so we oppose a RIF. We think it's a bad move for the federal government. We know the amount of work that is out there and the amount of services that require federal employees. And so we believe a RIF would be damaging to the federal government.
And how does the RIF process work?
The RIF process, reduction in force, is a complicated process. That is why we go into great detail in some of our contracts. It follows, there's actual regulations that dictate how a RIF is done. Let me give you just a taste. We don't have time within this time frame to kind of go through the whole RIF process, but it is a very specific process. Normally, you get at least 60 days notice. We have reason to believe there's language that allows OPM to grant a 30-day process if in case of emergency. We're not aware of any emergency going on here, but that may be a tactic that is used. It involves identifying a competitive area. That could be a geographic location or organizational. It involves different standards to create a retention list. So what do they look at? Tenure, type of job, veterans preference, length of service comes into play, and performance. And so all of those things would be looked at to determine who would stay and who may be impacted by the RIF. Now, let me say this. We know agencies have been asked to put forward plans. NTEU has been actively asking for those plans. We've not received them yet. As soon as we have those plans, we would definitely share that information to kind of give you the broad scope of what they're looking at. Don't trust what's always in the media, because we've seen all sorts of reports. Some said as high as 75%, 50%, 10%. We don't know where that falls, and I assume every agency is a little different. But we're watching very closely, and we will be putting out more information to our members about a RIF. We will also be putting out additional information about what that means and the process itself.
Thank you. Next question. Is NTEU going to offer any additional assistance beyond what the agency is offering for employees who may be RIFed?
So NTEU is going to be very active in this process. We don't get a say whether they RIF or not. Obviously, we're going to push to educate politicians, our congressmen, representatives. We're also going to push the agency to show them if we believe there's errors in how they're looking at staffing, et cetera, to make sure that they can still deliver services for the American people. A couple of things that we will also push for. Voluntary separation incentives or a buyout like VSIP. We're going to push agencies to look at that, to encourage if there are people that qualify for that and would be interested in that, to allow them to take those things to free up some additional staffing for people to stay at the agencies. We're also going to push for VERA, which is Voluntary Early Retirement Authority. And so that would be something else that we as a union negotiate for and try to get in place that helps the impact of a RIF. In addition, we have a partnership with United Benefits. United Benefits is a partner that can help provide counseling, benefits counseling to our members. So if you're an NTEU member, you can go to unitedbenefits.com, and on their website itself, they have information about VERA, VSIP, and also about how a RIF would impact you and your benefits, et cetera. They recently did a webinar on it, and so there's a lot of information there. That will get you started, but understand that NTEU will also be supplementing that information once we have additional scope and perspective on each agency and what their plans are.
So, with so much confusion going on around RIF, is it safe to say that there is some structured RIF process?
There is definitely a structured process. It's specific. How the agencies go about determining like the specific area that's impacted or the numbers, we still don't know. But we're definitely going to be providing additional information to help members navigate this. Now, I understand there's people out there who are terrified of a RIF, and with good reason. I mean, you've dedicated your life to a career at an agency, and the unknown is scary. So we're going to try to get as much information as we can to people and also help navigate that. There's also procedures in RIF that if you are removed, you may have rights if you hire back, if the government would then rehire. There's other avenues to protect you. There's bump and retreat rights that you may have for different positions. So as I said, it's very complicated, and we want to make sure to educate our members when we get into that step, what's available, and we're going to keep pushing to limit how many jobs are impacted by this. Because, again, we know the valuable work you do for the federal government. You're needed, you are essential, and taxpayers count on you to deliver the services you do. And so as part of our overall scheme, this RIF is going to be impacted by how many people may have taken the voluntary early retirement that was offered through the fork. It's going to be impacted by how many people are actually retiring. We know the federal government has an aged workforce, and many people, through the threats and the anxiety, have just decided enough is enough. Understand that. So we're looking, and I've heard a lot of people say, I've had a long career. I may retire to make room for some younger folks coming in who are new. So there's a lot of different movement going on, but we will get more information out to our folks.
And how will this additional information be disseminated?
It's going to be in different ways. Obviously, if this night is a success for us and people enjoyed this kind of content, we'll try to look at doing things like this. Our chapters will do a great job of providing information and sharing it with their memberships. As I said, each agency is going to be very unique. And so we will be working with our chapters, as well as our chapters each have an assistant counsel or field representative that is assigned to them. And through them, they will also provide information. There could be lunch and learns, there could be formal meetings. There's a burden on the agencies to communicate with employees as well.
So those employees with these type questions, they really should not let the agency off the hook. They really should be reaching out for an explanation and asking questions from the agency.
I agree 100%. They are their employer and they owe them those answers. The frustrating part of what's been happening is the agencies have not been part of the RIF planning. And so you kind of sit back and say, how is that possible? The agency that runs its mission should be a player in deciding what happens. And yet, it's kind of been at the cabinet level where they've been trying to answer the administration's call to eliminate large amounts of federal employees without any regard to the services that they provide or the mission of the agency. And so oftentimes when employees do ask these questions, the immediate answer is, we just don't know. They're not lying. They don't know. And that's what's so dangerous about RIFs of this nature. You want people who understand the work of the agency, understand what that impact, if you lose 10% of employees, where that is going to impact most. And right now, we just don't have those answers.
But do you think, as from an evidence standpoint, that these types of communications, when employees are seeking information, they should be emailing their managers versus a phone call? I think that when we're talking about evidence and potentially these matters headed to the courts, we need proof that we have done, or the employees, they've done their part in seeking information, seeking guidance. I think that weighs heavily when it comes down to decision making in terms of, look, this employee was in the right, they did the right thing, reached out, but no response from you, and here's evidence that took place.
I agree. Anytime you can document guidance that's given to you, whether it's a formal meeting that they provide a PowerPoint, print that out, keep it in your files, make sure you have good records of all your files, your appraisals, any of your documents that would be in your OPF that document your time in service, veterans preference. Keep track of those records because you want to make sure that you have the right data in order to challenge if there's any question on that. And so, yes, it's good to document, it's good to ask those questions and get that information. And I would encourage people, right now we don't have the facts, but don't be afraid to ask the questions. Go to unitedbenefits.com, get some basic information. As I said, this is a complex process. Even learning the words about what, like competitive area and retention, all of those things mean different things under RIF. And so we want to make sure that people have a good understanding because the decisions they make impact their lives.
Thank you, Doreen. We will now take a 5-minute break. Welcome back. First of all, let us apologize. We had about 8 minutes where there was no live streaming, but we did get the recording. So those 8 minutes that you didn't see our beautiful faces, you'll be able to see it on the recording. Our next category is dealing with collective bargaining rights. And the question, How are we supposed to feel confident in the power of the contract if we're being told that a direct violation of the contract is to be followed and to just wait it out while the judge makes a decision on things which can take months? Without the right to strike, what hope does the union have to enforce the contract in the future?
Well, I understand that everybody is really frustrated with where we are. We have solid, legally negotiated contracts. And one would expect that an incoming administration would follow the law. Unfortunately, that has not been the experience so far, especially with the executive order on telework. And so NTEU has done everything legally we can to enforce the telework provisions of our contract. That said, our contracts remain in place and enforceable. So as you look at other things happening in your offices, please make sure to bring them to the attention of a steward, a chapter president, and they will work with our assistant counsels and our attorneys at NTEU to address the best ways to approach that issue. The fact is that our contracts not only were negotiated across the table by representatives of both the union and the agency. It is not just the union contract, it is a binding contract between the parties. The language was fought hard to make sure it worked for both parties, and it should be enforced. And so what we've seen, at least on the telework provisions, we have filed institutional grievances about their failure to adhere to those. We will work our way through that process. In addition, I've heard people say, well, let's just file a lawsuit. We should be suing them. If we could file a lawsuit at this point, we would. We are monitoring everything that is happening to see if there's any avenue that we could do that. The problem is that telework is, again, a negotiated procedure. And so the right of telework comes from the contract itself. There is no law that requires you to telework. Even the Telework Enhancement Act gives great deference to agencies. You still have to go through that process and negotiate who's eligible for it, how that would work, and then all the terms of that telework agreement. So NTEU has filed these grievances. We are going to continue to communicate. We will share with our members when the grievances are filed. We've done that. As we hold meetings in each of the agencies, we will advise our members of when the meeting is held. We will advise members of the outcome of those meetings and the process along the way. Normally you hear us file a grievance and we'll let you know when it's done. But because of the sensitive nature of this, I want to make sure we are communicating with you frequently about the progress of us enforcing this contract. And so when somebody says to me, why should we have confidence in our contract? You should have confidence in the fact that you have a contract that is transparent, that is legal. In many cases, we've had to arbitrate provisions in the contract, or even through negotiations had either an arbitrator come in or it go to the panel, the Federal Services Impasse Panel, and awarded us language. Our contracts go through agency head review before they're implemented. These are binding agreements. And so NTEU is doing everything in our power to make sure that we enforce those contracts. And keep in mind, the only thing right now that we've seen is the telework issue. People should still be doing AWS, should still be doing credit hours, all the other provisions. And like I said, if you have a manager or a department or something that's not following the contract, we should be enforcing that language as well.
What about the right to strike?
You know, I get it. People are so angry and frustrated, and they want to do something to fight back. We're going to talk tonight about a lot of different ways you can act and fight back. Striking isn't one of them. It's illegal for a federal employee to strike. Now, I've heard people say to me, well, they're not following the rules. Why should we follow the rules? Well, let me tell you a story. Back in the early 80s, there was a group of air traffic controllers, and their union went on strike. And air traffic controllers felt, we're going to take a stand because what's happening to us is not fair, and we're not easily replaceable. So they challenged President Reagan at the time. President Reagan held them accountable. They were immediately fired. We are working very hard as a union to retain federal employees in the federal government. You are necessary and essential. We do not encourage you to do things that will have you removed. And striking is the immediate thing that will happen there. So when people say to me, we should strike, the answer is no, we should not. There are other ways to act. When people say to me, well, maybe we don't have to work as hard as we should. Well, guess what? You're feeding their narrative because they want to paint federal employees as lazy and not hard workers. That's far from the truth. And we need to set the record straight on that, not feed that narrative.
Yeah, we don't want to help Doge out by getting ourselves fired. Second question, how is the union planning to challenge or negotiate against mass layoffs, reclassifications, or at-will employment changes? How does DOGE impact federal employee rights under existing collective bargaining agreements? And are there any legal protections still in place to prevent DOGE from overriding negotiated labor contracts?
Well, DOGE is brand new to the landscape. You know, we looked into it. They're not officially a government agency, but it appears like when they want to act like a government agency, they are. But when somebody asks them for data about what they're doing, they're suddenly not a government agency, because if you're an agency, you have to turn over that data. So they're kind of playing both sides of the fence. What we've learned with DOGE in many of the federal agencies is they've come on site, accessed computer systems, but I've not seen interactions with the bargaining unit from DOGE. I've not seen interactions with them with our contracts per se. As far as, I think you asked me about, at-will employment, and we've talked about that in the past. Under the previous Trump administration, it was called Schedule F. He put in an executive order. It's called something different, but that is kind of changing employment status to at-will. And on day one of the administration, when he filed his executive order, we filed our lawsuit on that. And so that's really outside of DOGE's perspective. But, we're continuing to fight back on all of this. I'm asking for DOGE to show the receipts, because they're posting a lot of things that they've gone into computer systems and they say they're making all these savings. I've not seen the dollars. I kind of would like to call their bluff on some of this stuff. Because you and I know, being federal employees ourselves, the best people to ask where to find efficiencies in the federal government are the people who do the job.
Yes.
And so what the American voters wanted was somebody to go into the government and analyze systems and figure out where there could be efficiencies, and then make those changes. I'm encouraged to see that recent polling shows that the American people do not support the firing of federal employees. They like federal employees. They count on federal employees. And so that's a narrative we do want to support, because we know how important services are to the American people, and we know federal employees are the backbone of the federal government. And so these are the kind of things that we have to push. Federal employees are not against efficiency. They're against what DOGE is doing, and that has nothing to do with efficiency.
Third question. What is NTEU doing in conjunction with other federal unions to combat the trend of federal agencies unilaterally disregarding or abandoning collective bargaining agreements?
As we've said probably a zillion times in the last 2 months, these are unprecedented times. And NTEU has always worked with a coalition of federal groups. We were in the Fed Postal Coalition. But since this administration took office, our union, as well as other federal unions, have come together in solidarity to fight for the common good. All of our members are impacted by the attacks on the federal workforce. So NTEU is working with AFGE, AFL-CIO, third-party groups like Democracy Forward, Public Citizen, ACLU. We are willing to work with anybody who can help us take on these challenges and do so to the betterment of our members. And so it is not about this union versus that union. We are working in solidarity to fight against these things. And we're going to continue to do that because when we work together, we are stronger and we can take on the challenges and use our resources to the benefit of our members and also to present a unified front. Because right now, what is happening to this country, I think it goes beyond federal unions. Federal employees are under attack. So federal unions are stepping up to protect federal employees. Federal employees are very concerned about the government that they serve and the country that they took an oath to through the Constitution. And so there are barriers here that we are all fighting against. So if you come after federal employees, you're coming after their union. If you come after their union, then other unions need to get involved because if the federal unions fall, the private sector is next. And so this is about the working people of this country standing up and taking their country back.
In terms of lawsuits, I get this question all the time. Employees are concerned or members are concerned if they see the union's name in a lawsuit, they don't see it in a lawsuit. Can you talk about reasons as to why they might see it in some and not in others?
Absolutely. I get the same question. Like, how come NTEU's name isn't front and center on this? Because of the coalition that we are working with, and because of the case specifics, behind the scenes, the unions sit together and they talk about what is the best way to approach a lawsuit. Depending on the agencies that each union represents, depending on the actual case that we're fighting, you have to make decisions about who can put the best case forward because you want to win. And so sometimes NTEU will be on the lead because of whatever the issue is. We may be experts in that forefront. Sometimes it'll be another union. Sometimes it may be a third party that we're working with. We want to use our resources to the best of our ability. So don't think just because NTEU may not be the first name on that list or even not shown in the first couple names, understand that we are working hard to work with all of these unions and these other groups that will help our members.
Good. And while you and I know this, I think it would help if our members are set at ease by knowing that when we make decisions regarding lawsuits, that's not just an off-the-cuff decisions, that you're having discussions with our attorneys who are, I think, the best about what we should or should not do in those situations.
I think it's easy sometimes to criticize, but I will tell you that I'm very proud of our entire staff. We have the majority of our staff, I think probably about 80% of our staff are attorneys that are fighting on behalf of our members. And you're absolutely right. They are skilled in the federal government and how to navigate the federal courts. That is not the same as what you see on TV. It is not the same as in the private sector necessarily. And so there's challenges that they have to navigate, and they have knowledge about cases that have won and have failed. And so those kind of strategies are talked through. I've also had, people say to me, why don't we quick file a lawsuit today? You know it's coming. Mm-hmm. Well, similar to a grievance, oftentimes you have to have a harm before that lawsuit can be filed. And sometimes you file a lawsuit and you file that lawsuit with the understanding you will be amending it going forward as more facts and details become available. And so, I just urge people, we have a reputation at NTEU for being solid, strong advocates for our members. And we present excellent lawsuits to the point that other not only unions, but other legal minds come to us because they know we are the experts to get guidance and to bounce things off us and to do those things. So I get it. When your job's at stake, you want to make sure we're bringing the biggest fight possible. I promise you, we are always going to be bringing the biggest fight possible because we want nothing more than to protect you.
I second that. Now moving on to telework. What is the status of the national grievance regarding telework?
So national grievances were filed, institutional grievances were filed in each of our agencies that we represent where telework was eliminated or stopped or paused. And so again, I mentioned it earlier, although we may not have been streaming, but recorded, that as we prosecute these grievances, we will be communicating directly with our members about the steps. And so the grievances are filed. We've sent notices out about those grievances being filed. As we schedule meetings with agencies and hold those meetings, we'll advise you that we've held the meeting. When we get responses, we will share those responses and continue through that process. We have to exhaust the grievance process. If we don't reach resolution through the grievance process, we will then go to arbitration and we will follow that process through. These processes do take some time. On average, we're thinking somewhere between 6 and 9 months. That can vary by agency. It could vary if the administration changes its position on things. I saw a recent study, 73% of Americans support telework, and they don't care where people work. As you know, NTEU's had telework in some of our contracts going back to the early 90s. This had nothing to do with the pandemic. And so as we see more and more offices return people to the office, and we see that they don't have basic space to house the employees, proper working conditions for the employees, they're making makeshift areas that they don't even have data resources and can't plug in their computers. Many of the agencies have had to grant exceptions. And recently, as of early this week, OPM put out some FAQs on telework. And they talked about the difference for remote workers, and remote workers should not be captured under the guidance of the executive order. And so as of starting yesterday, we started to reach out to some agencies about remote workers, because we know we have some, for telework purposes, people defined as remote workers, and asking them to be allowed to go back on telework if they fit that. Now, I haven't heard any responses from agencies, but we're pushing in every way we can while these grievances are prosecuted.
How is NTEU fighting back on the return to work policy for remote workers?
Same with remote workers. They're covered under our national grievances. We're going to keep pushing that. Obviously, remote work is a little different in that some people were hired as remote workers, and so we have to look at some of the details of this. Some were on pilots. Others were temporarily on it, and that may have been pulled back. Some agencies have granted extensions to the return to office because of where people live, if they're beyond 50 miles or whatever the situation is. So again, we file grievances on this, and we're getting more information, and we are looking for ways that we can fight back on that.
Okay. Do you recommend signing the new telework agreement?
So not all agencies may have this, but again, as a means to kind of build in some flexibilities for the agencies, not for the employees. There's some agencies that are granted limited or what we call ad hoc telework, and they're asking them to do new agreements. And so what I would advise employees to do is, if that works for you, sign it. If you want to do some form of ad hoc telework that your agency is offering, and that's okay with you, do it. It will not harm our position with our grievances. We are still going to push to get the telework back to where our contracts said it should be. I also know there's some people out there who said, mess with my telework, make me come in. I'm not giving them anything. So then when there's a snow day or they want something else, I'll be on admin leave. again, your call on that. I'm not encouraging either position. But understand that when it's a snow day and they don't close the office, because ultimately they have the control of that, yes, you're going to have to report or take leave or things. So weigh your options, but I want people to know that if there are some flexibilities offered, you're not going to harm our rights under this grievance, right, and do what's best for you.
Regarding national grievances being filed, can you speak about there may be times when it's feasible to also file local grievances?
Absolutely. Our contracts remain in place. And so as there are different issues in those contracts, I would encourage employees to bring those issues to their chapter like they normally would, a steward or the chapter president, and have those discussions. The chapters will look at the details of the information. They know what the institutional grievances say. For example, some of our contracts have specific language that allows for voluntary hardships using telework, or medical hardships that allow them to telework periodically. That's different than what necessarily our national grievance says. And so those individual specifics, the chapter may want to file that grievance to protect that employee's rights and timeframes. Now understand, an agency is always going to say, NTEU already filed this grievance. You can't file this again locally. Most of the time what happens is it'll be held in abeyance, and we will argue at national whether we feel like it fits under that umbrella or not. But it's important to file those locally, and I'm not just talking about telework. We've got, reasonable accommodations out there if we need to file grievances on there. If there's simple things like desks and seating and things that haven't been addressed, with this mass callback to the offices, they are overlooking a lot of the rules. And so chapters have a right to file local grievances on those specifics if they're not covered by a national grievance.
Okay. And with that answer, we'll take a 5-minute break. And welcome back. Our next category is retirement. Will folks that get RIF'd who are at full retirement age get a severance?
Well, here we are again talking about RIF. So again, there are so many details and specifics you need to learn about RIF in order to make good decisions. To that question, my understanding in reviewing the rules is once you are at full retirement age, meaning that when you retire and you can take an immediate annuity, you would not get that severance package. That said, there are ins and outs of other things that may be offered as part of a RIF, like a buyout or things of that nature. And so I really encourage people to understand what's being offered to them and how it could impact the decisions they're making. And so that is crucial to making sure that you get all that's offered to you on the table. And so I am not somebody that should give guidance on RIF specifically. But just to address that question, that's my understanding of the rules. But again, there's some ins and outs that we're going to want people to know about, and we will be putting more information out as we go forward.
And should employees be at least attempting to check with internal resources within their agency? Absolutely.
There's no reason to wait. So again, from an NTEU perspective, we have a relationship with United Benefits, who are benefits counselors certified. If you go to their website, unitedbenefits.org, or excuse me, .com, they have information on RIF. They have information on VERA, VSEP. They have information on what, like your FEHB benefits, all those different things. Give it a try, take a look, get some information. Push your agency, ask those questions of your agency. We do expect agencies to start training people and getting more information out. Right now, I think the agencies are kind of in a holding pattern because they're waiting to see what plans have been put forward, because again, they have not been shared those plans and have had no input into those plans. And then we'll have to share that information with the people impacted.
Next question. What are you doing to protect retired NTEU members?
So I think that's a great question. My first answer is many people don't even know they can be retired NTEU members. So if you are thinking about retiring or know somebody who has retired, remind them to stay in the fight with us. It's $42 a year. What a bargain. Stay with us, stay in the fight, make sure that all of the great things that you fought for during your career are still available for the next generation, just like the people before you did. And so people sometimes don't understand that they can be a member, and so we encourage people to definitely sign up. We have a newsletter designed just for retirees. We are on the Hill fighting for benefits to protect people's benefits that they're getting, fighting for new things. We just had a recent win for people who were their Social Security, because they had earned Social Security before coming into the federal government under CSRS. They were limited on what they could get from Social Security. We fought that case over 20 years and recently got a win on that. So NTEU fights for retirees every day. We're going to keep fighting. And we're also going to keep fighting to make sure those retirement benefits stay for federal employees. So stay a member, stay a part of the fight. Terry, you know, as retirees, we count on them a lot to be active and engaged in our chapters. Retirees have time. They can reach out and speak to their congressmen, senators. They're very active when we get ready for getting the vote out and doing some of that work. They're very helpful with our chapters. There is so much of a wealth of knowledge that we need them to help new members in NTEU. So as we have new people stepping into these roles, the people who have experienced NTEU and understand our mission and our goals and our fight, we help each other. We're a family. And so we want you to stay as a member of the family.
And I can speak from personal experience. Many chapter leaders have retired and stayed on active with the union. So thank you, retirees who are union representatives.
Absolutely. I've even had a couple say to me with these pending RIFs that they're eligible to retire. And they said, you know, if they try to RIF us or get rid of us, you know, I may have to retire, but I'm staying in this fight. So they understand the stakes and they're in for the fight. So we all have to stick together during these times and get through this challenge and come out victorious.
Yes, yes. Now the next category is Congress. How is NTEU leveraging the legislative body to protect NTEU members?
So NTEU has a great legislative program. And what we've always said is that NTEU will support anybody who supports us. If they have our back, we'll have their back. And what I've learned I've known this for a while, but what it's really been highlighted for me is with all of the attacks on the federal workforce, how little the public and members of Congress understand about the federal government and how it works. Federal employees do such a great job, everything runs smooth. It's not until that breaks that they start asking questions. So we've learned as a society to take these things for granted. But now when it's under attack, people don't understand that when you take away thousands of people, services don't happen. People get hurt in that process. And so now more than ever, we count on our federal workforce to educate the public and Congress about the important work that they do. And so one of the ways NTEU is really powerful in this is we have a legislative action center. And kudos to Terry, because this is something he's pushed and we've really adopted, is when things impact federal employees, it doesn't just happen to federal employees. It happens to their friends, their family, their communities. And we've had to push because when we saw the termination of thousands of probationary employees, it barely hit the news because it was a trimming in DC. But we know over 80% of federal workers are outside of DC.
Yes.
And so we rely on federal employees who are outside of DC to show the impact that these cuts that are being pushed will impact communities and the services that the American people rely on. And so we all have to be active in this fight, and we have to get engaged legislatively because Congress carries the power of the purse. And our agencies have to be budgeted in a way that they have the resources and the tools necessary to deliver their mission. And so it doesn't stop with federal employees. As you said, it takes family and friends. And so when you go to our Legislative Action Center, you can go to nteu.org. On the right-hand side is the Legislative Action Center. You don't have to be a member. You can log into there, you, your family, and friends. There's pre-populated letters that based on where you live, it will go to your congressman or senator, and it is your way to express your asks, your frustration, your opposition, your support to whatever is happening in Congress. I cannot say enough that we need everyone, family, friends, call, write, call again, write again, follow up, call. That kind of action, while you may not change your congressman's mind on some of these things, you have an opportunity to educate them. And what Congress does know, if they're getting those kind of calls or letters, people are paying attention. And what you do have that nobody else does is the right to vote for them. So you can even move the needle or you can hold them accountable. And so that's what we really need to push. And I know you have some advice on social media.
Oh, yeah. That's my favorite. I believe that while we're winning some cases in the court, we're also in a position to win in the court of public opinion. We're seeing the tide shifting where people are being impacted, not Democrats, not Republicans, but people are being impacted by what's taking place by this administration. And so we have to capitalize on that. And social media, I attended one of our training sessions and I asked a question about how many people are on social media, and I think half the room raised their hand. So we use it for personal, but this is an opportune time for us to use our social media platform to get the word out, to tell our friends, tell our family members, tell our stories about what's taking place. And then ask our families, our friends to share this information, post it. Every individual who has a social media account has his or her own little group or following. Whatever number of people that are in that circle, they have their own following. So imagine that if you had 500 people in your social media circle and you asked those 500 people each to reach out to their circle to get the message out, to get these stories out, to let the public know how what is happening to us is impacting them. So this is an opportune time for us to use our social media platform for not just for pleasure, but for business, but very important business at hand, and that is getting the word out and sharing what's taking place and asking our families, our friends, and anyone who supports us to get on this wagon and let's fight this fight.
And you raise such a good point because I know federal employees are not used to being politically active. They're uncomfortable about it because their jobs are apolitical. And as much as people want to paint federal employees as being leaning one way or the other, I don't buy that because the work we do, as you know, you walk in the door, politics don't enter the work you do. You take an oath to the Constitution, regardless of who is in charge of the administration or who's leading Congress or the Senate, and you put your head down and you get to work. And you care deeply about that mission and what you're trying to deliver. So when federal employees are vilified and under attack, they don't know why. They don't understand it. They feel very hurt by that because what they are doing is upholding the laws that who passed? Right. Congress. It wasn't federal employees don't come to work and say, what do I feel like doing today? They have a mission, and they're very policy driven by that mission. And so what I want our federal employees to understand, the American people like you. They respect you. They appreciate the work you do. So when I ask you to call or to send a letter, it's really about education. Because when we talk to congressmen, when individual members talk to them and say, I work for the National Park Service, or I work as a Customs and Border Protection officer, and here's what I do and why this is valuable to this country, and why not having resources puts our country at risk. They need to understand that when they make votes, whether they're going to support an agency or not. So it is critical that we be advocates for each other.
Yes.
And help the American people, because the narrative out there is false. You know, I'm still seeing news about 87,000 armed agents at the IRS. They don't even have 87,000 employees, period. Agents are not armed.
Right.
And that was always a false narrative. But it was to scare the American people. Now they're trying to scare the federal employees. We cannot be taken back by that fear. We have to be smart. We have to be strategic. We need to use our brains and our intelligence and our skills to step up to the plate and educate people, because that will help us navigate these challenges.
And based on that, what is the plan for the midterm elections?
More of that. We need everybody engaged for the midterms. Both of the House and the Senate have very narrow margins. If we care about our agencies and the mission and the services they provide the American people, we have to ensure that they don't gut the federal government. We also have to make sure that they protect the civil service. Why is that so important? Because people's work should not be political. It should stay the way it is. The suggested changes that you somehow pass a loyalty test, like, Terry, you didn't vote my way, so I don't want you there. Well, what if that person, then when I go to get service from you, I voted a different way? Does that mean you're going to treat me differently? Right now, we know politics don't enter the fray. We also know it's difficult to recruit people to do federal work.
Yes, it is.
It takes years for people to get up to speed to do that work successfully, so they are not easily replaceable. And what just happened this last month with probationary employees, it has had a chilling effect. People are afraid. Even the people that have won through these lawsuits to come back are scared to come back, because they're like, this uprooted my entire life, and am I coming back only to be cut again? That's the sentiment out there. We need stability in our federal government. And so that is why the midterms are so crucial. We need to have people that have the backs of the federal employees, so that our country is not chaotic, but runs successfully, efficiently. And again, we can talk about efficiency, but this is not about efficiency. This is about gutting agencies and attacking the people that do the work that Congress has asked them to do. And so we need to get all of us out there fighting for our country, because it's not just about federal employees. It's about federal employees and their families. It's about the services that taxpayers rely on. It's about our federal unions. It's about private unions. It's about workers in general. It's about delivering for the American people. And when I took that oath and you took that oath, we were damn serious about it. And I know everybody on here is serious about their oath. And we have to hold Congress accountable for the same thing that they asked us to do.
Now, this question kind of ties in with Congress and telework. And it's important that those employees, particularly who are concerned about their telework situation, when we're telling the story, it's important that we make that secondary and about the services that's being impacted by bringing everybody back to the office. You can only seat 5 people, but you got 20 waiting in the hallway. The story that needs to be told is, this is how the service that I'm prepared to give you is being impacted. Make that primary, and then by default, it turns into a telework issue, because taxpayers are going to say, well, why aren't they at home working, giving me a service, instead of you making them come into an office where there aren't enough seats?
Absolutely. And a good way to document that is NTEU launched Members Stories at NTEU.org. So member stories at NTEU.org. And you can share your stories about how you've been impacted by telework, or stories about probationary employees and how decisions made have impacted you. We've heard stories from people who were recruited from the federal government, pulled away from their job, enticed with a bonus only to be cut. We've heard employees that have worked for the federal government for 20 plus years, took a new job, were successful to be cut. You know, these are the vital stories that of our members and their families and how that's impacted. And so we want to share those stories. So please, I urge you to, if you have a unique story, share it. And again, it is the story about the services, because, you know, we like to talk about, one of the examples I think about is during the pandemic, for years prior to the pandemic, we fought at IRS to get customer service representatives, people who sit on the phone all day long and answer taxpayers' calls. They are logged into a system, they get a call after call. They're monitored for their bathroom breaks, everything. They could never put them on telework. They got money through COVID funding, and they were able to get them laptops. Their level of service, now I'm telling you point blank, the level of service was low, not because of COVID, but because of the lack of resources. They went from 12% level of service, answering calls for taxpayers, to over 85%. Last year, I believe at this time, they were around 93%. With all the chaos that's happened and people leaving, they're already backsliding from that. And so we know these changes have had negative impacts to services. And they have just started because they've kept a lot of people on for the filing season. We're going to expect to see those numbers lower. So those are the kind of stories that we want to raise and share with the American people, because I know that people want to get their phone calls answered.
Yes, they do.
Before people were working at home and had the equipment to do that, they'd sit online for 2-3 hours and get what the IRS would call kindly a courtesy disconnect. Can you imagine sitting on a phone for 2 or 3 hours and getting hung up on and saying that was service? Trust me, nobody cares where somebody's working. If you answer that phone and give them the answer to their question and they can move on with their day, they're happy. That's what we should be searching for, is efficient ways to make taxpayers happy. And that's what the IRS should be doing, and not be playing these little games.
I agree. And on that note, we'll take a 5-minute break. And we're back. Thank you for returning. Now we're moving on to the category of union. Question number 1. Can you briefly discuss any coordination between other unions/resources? What are the actual stakes for labor in general when CBAs are ignored?
I think it's a really good question, and something we kind of touched on earlier. So, as I said earlier, NTEU has been in coordination and in a coalition with our brothers and sisters of other federal unions, and even beyond that, working with other organizations that are aligned with some of our goals for our membership. And so we have been coordinating our efforts because resources are always primary, that, you know, hardworking members pay dues in support of our efforts. And so we're always very cognizant of using those dues wisely. And by working together with other federal unions, we can expand those resources so that no one union has to take a bigger hit than necessary, and we can get the biggest bang for our buck. So that's very important. As far as the stakes to the labor movement in general, it is never good when an administration does not respect a federal union or any union, because in essence what they are saying is they don't respect the workers of this country. What unions do is give a voice to workers. They just want a fair shake to be able to sit at the table, have their voices be heard, and help achieve a better, more efficient workplace. As we talked about with DOGE, where DOGE should be working is sitting down with federal employees and identifying areas that federal employees see every day that could be adjusted to be more efficient. But they don't have the authorities to make those changes. But they see them every day.
Yes.
Instead, they're taking basically a hatchet or a chainsaw to the federal government without regard to services or understanding how each organization, each activity interacts with others. And so it's difficult when we have to stand up and fight just to have a voice in the workplace. And so it is damaging to me that to me everything is at stake for labor and for the working class. I mean, they need to continue to have a voice in the workplace. We've seen membership increase because employees understand the value of having that voice, having a strong contract. It eliminates a lot of the grievances in the workplace. We're about dignity and respect. That's all we're asking, is that I'm going to come to work and do the work you hired me to do, but I ask that you treat me as a human being, as an adult, with dignity and respect. And instead, by taking away, playing these little games like give us 5 things you did last week, that's insulting. Yes. Not that it's difficult. It's not a problem that people do those things, but it's not necessary.
Right.
It's a way of playing cat and mouse with our employees. And I find that to be a huge issue. And so we can't allow our contracts to be ignored. We have to fight to enforce them. We have to stand up for what we believe in, and we have to come together. This whole plot is about creating chaos. It's about attacking our members and the federal workforce. It's about making people scared, giving them high anxiety, hoping they will go home quietly, and they will get their way. But I'm banking, I believe deeply, that the federal workforce is made of a tougher cloth than that. They care about the work they do. They care about the mission that they deliver. They care about their oath to the Constitution. And now, like we've never had to do in years prior, we've taken for granted our contracts in somewhat because we've been able to do things. Now we have to fight to retain those things. And so this is a call to action for all of us. We need to stand up for what we believe in. We need to stand shoulder to shoulder, and we have to keep fighting until we restore it back to where it needs to be.
Is it safe to say that by unions, be it private or public, all of us are concerned that this administration, doesn't matter whether you're private or public, if you're a union, then you're on their bullseye. Is it safe to say that that's a concern with our coalition in talking to other unions and these forces that are gathering together? Absolutely.
In the conversations we have, we know if you come after one, you're going to come after the next group. That as long as they're successful attacking one, they're going to keep going. This is about power in our country. And when you take away the voices of the people who are actually doing the work in favor of the people who are collecting all the money, there's an imbalance. Now, employees just want a fair shake. That's all they're looking for. They want to have a voice in the workplace and be treated with dignity and respect. So to attack them and to attack their union really shows you how important and how powerful employees can be if they work together, because they wouldn't fight to take it away from you if it didn't matter.
Are you concerned about the administration dismantling the union?
I am not concerned about the administration dismantling the union. If the question was, do you think they'll try? Absolutely. They didn't set up this union. They're not dismantling this union. We are in it for the long haul. 88 years we have been around. From a small group in Wisconsin that started in 1938 as an association and worked its way to a federal union representing 37 federal agencies and looking to grow. This is on our watch, and this is our responsibility to retain our union. The administration does not tell our members who to support, who to believe in, and who to come together with. And so, no, I am not concerned about them dismantling this union. I want to bring to them and explain to them the power of our union, and that's what we will do.
Is there anything that we can do to assist NTEU with our efforts to protect us?
Absolutely. We all need to get involved. I often talk about people who say, what is NTEU doing? And I look at them kind of puzzled because as a member, you are NTEU. You are NTEU. I'm NTEU. We're all NTEU. Not one person is going to make the day happen.
Right.
It is the power of all of us together, fighting for what is important to us that makes us a union. And we have to be bigger than just one issue. And so again, this attack is about taking away your voice and your power and sidelining you. We're not going to let that happen. We're going to stand up, stand proud, and fight for what we believe in. And we will be stronger. We are going to navigate these challenges and we will come out stronger for the next generation. Because the next generation believes in unions. They understand that power. And so it is on our watch right now to do everything we can to build it stronger, navigate these challenges, and get ready for the next generation.
Yes. This is a different question from a different category, but there have been a lot of talk and we've seen action regarding IRS locations being closed or signs going up for sale. Do you have the listing of which IRS office locations will be closed? And do you have any IRS restructuring information?
So I understand the question's dedicated for IRS, but we're asking for all of this from all agencies because all agencies are getting these kind of decisions like, oh, we're going to close all of this, or
right.
And many people are seeing it in the media. They're not seeing it from their own agency. We do not have current lists. They are continually changing. We've seen many situations where they announce there's a closure and then that's pulled back. There's some regulations out there as well as rules for at least IRS. The Taxpayer First Act requires that if they close certain offices, they have to give a 90-day notice to both Congress and the public, which didn't happen, so they had to pull some of those back. We're seeing it in other agencies as well. We are also working with Congress to ask for this data because they don't have it either. And so, as I said, they have the power of the purse. And so we're trying to get a handle on what's really happening. Now, I'm not so opposed to closing buildings. I am opposed to not telling people that you're closing the building and working with their union to make that happen. They could save a lot of buildings by supporting telework. That was always the purpose behind telework, is reducing the real estate footprint, reducing the amount of people who have to commute, and allowing people whose work is portable and can be successfully done off-site to do that. We would stand ready to work with them to accomplish that because I believe in using resources for the people who provide the services over buildings. That said, that's not where we're at today. But know that we are trying to get a handle on what these final outcomes are. But again, agencies have not had say, and you're absolutely correct, Terry, that we get reports from members who say, hey, I just pulled up at my office and there's a big for sale sign. Is that a hint? They don't know. And when we contact the agency, they're like, what? We didn't know there was a for sale sign either. So we are trying to track this down. Everything we hear is fluid. That one day it's on a list, it's off a list, it's back on a list. So as soon as we get any firm information, we will share.
What actions are being taken to prepare for further Project 2025 attacks on government employees?
Project 2025 loomed heavy in the whole election process. The American people did not like Project 2025. That was very clear. And once that was known, the current administration backed away from Project 2025. In fact, they denied knowing about it and said they didn't support it. Fast forward to now, and there's even a tracker out there about the progress of this administration implementing Project 2025. NTEU has been very aware of this blueprint that was over 900 pages. We are monitoring it. We are prepared for actions that we think will come from it. I hope that as public opinion continues to be outraged by some of the changes that are being imposed based on Project 2025, that they steer in a different direction. But we are ready for whatever comes our way.
Now, this one kind of goes back to how this whole thing first got started regarding these resignations. Will the union urge OPM to allow agents another opportunity to accept the fork in the road deferred resignation, since the union urged employees not to accept, and now it appears it was a good idea?
So I understand the confusion around the fork in the road. That was the first email that was sent by that weird email from HR at OPM. And as many people received the email, they didn't know what it was. They thought it was phishing. It actually shut down some phishing sites because people thought it was junk email. The reason why NTEU told people not to go with the fork in the road was, first of all, we think federal employees should continue to have a job. Second of all, the agreement that they put forward required employees to waive all of their rights and could not push back on anything, whether they lived up to that agreement or not. We were also concerned the legality of many of the things in the agreement they had to sign besides waiving their rights. There was no clear approval for any of the promises made in that. And in fact, I still get emails from people saying, hey, they promised me this, it didn't happen. They promised me that. NTEU, what are you going to do about that? There's nothing I can do about that. You waived your rights. So I still stand here today that I would never advise somebody to waive their rights with no promise or guarantee that we could force them to hold up. That said, if they go forward with RIFs, as we talked about the RIF process, obviously we're going to ask for the VERA and the VSIP and push for that. That is something we always push for in a RIF, and that would bring some of those procedures back. And so I can't make guarantees on that, but if they are truly serious that they want employees to leave the government, right. We know the workforce of the federal government is aged, and that many people have stayed well beyond their retirement age because they care about the work and there was not resources to replace them. And they hope to have a skill transfer. Yeah. But having things like VERA and VSIP may push people and lessen the need for a RIF, yeah, or the formal RIF process. So we will push for that, and we hope agencies will work with us to accomplish that.
So then is it safe to say that what they promised almost from day one, they've still yet to make good on it?
I've not heard them making good on it. I mean, some people were removed. We know some of the lists for the fork included people that did not ask for the fork, and we've had to work to fix that. The buyout is yet to be seen because that's supposed to happen in September sometime. There's a continuing resolution. Nothing was earmarked in there for funding buyouts, so we don't know what's going to happen there. Some agencies, they were promised, like, if you signed this, you would immediately been placed on like an administrative leave. That didn't happen for everybody. It's been pushed different dates. Some people put in for the fork and were fired anyway. So they have not lived up to all the details of it, and it's still kind of a wait and see.
Is the union doing any ads or public outreach to congressional leaders to emphasize the non-appropriated nature of many NTEU agencies?
I don't know that we're doing ads per se. I mean, we are looking at relaunching basically the faces of the federal workforce. We want to educate people about the important work that federal employees do and the services they provide. And so by having a campaign of that nature publicly, that will help identify the number of federal employees and the agencies and the roles they play. People just don't know. Right. As I said, it's when things run smooth, nobody asks. Right. But when you eliminate a process or something, then it impacts people. And so we're going to do our best to put the faces out there of the people that are doing this work and help connect those dots for not only the public, but for Congress as well. We also have people on the Hill that are always working to highlight the differences between our agencies, whether they, these DOGE attacks, it's not about funding savings, because like the question says, some of our agencies are appropriated through Congress, other ones have different funding sources. So why would you be attacking those funding sources when they don't get their money that way? It's not about saving money. It's about damaging the government. It's about destroying services that are in place and eliminating different departments. And so there isn't one solid answer for each of that, but we are attacking it from every realm and making sure we educate not only our members and the public, but also members of Congress as well to get behind some of these things so that we can fight back.
Now, some employees are, how we sometimes we think ahead and what ifs. With all that's going on, I mean, personally, I wouldn't put it past the agency or those in charge of the agency if anything comes down the line. But one question that keeps coming up, people are also now worried about their alternate work schedules, about those just being changed without any notice at all.
Well, I've not heard about that. I've seen some questions from people around, now that I'm back at the office, can I adjust my work schedule to come in at different hours because of commute times and those kinds of things? Again, our contracts are in place. And so if you have work schedules, if you have a way of changing those work schedules, all of that should still be in place. Nothing has changed. And so again, I would encourage people to be familiar with their rights in their contract, follow the rules about how you engage in changing those things. And if you're denied or if something is not in line with what the contract says, we need to enforce that contract.
And that way, and in this specific question, am I correct in that it should start at the local level?
Absolutely. If you don't understand your contract, talk to a local steward, ask them, how do I go about doing this? You put your request in writing. If there's a form, use the form. If it's just an email or something, you do that. And then you follow up with the manager. If the manager doesn't get back to you, you follow the chain of command, get an answer, and then if it's a denial for some reason, if that denial is not in line with what our contract says, reach out to the chapter, get a grievance started, and we need to push back on that.
Next question. Does the union judge shop for a judge that will hear our case? Who decides what judge will be handling our case?
I wish it was me. No. Obviously, there's a lot of thought processes about where to file lawsuits. It may depend on where the actual violations are occurring of the law. But oftentimes where we file, there's usually a group of judges, and they take turns based on their calendars and scheduling and things. So we don't get to say in who the judge is going to be. Sometimes you have a better pick than another pick. But we believe wholeheartedly that the lawsuits we put forward are solid on their premise of the law. And we feel strongly that no matter what judge we get, we should get a fair shake, because we believe we're following what the law says and then trying to enforce that. So while that sounds great that you could pick your judge, unfortunately it's not a popularity contest. It doesn't work that way.
And there's a second question, or a second part to that question. How long do you anticipate it will take before a judge reviews and decides on cases?
Well, so far we've seen some quick decisions, at least as far as temporary restraining orders and some of the actions around the probationary employees. Right. So that's good. But those are initial things. They do run out at times. Lawsuits take a life of their own. So I can't make any predictions on how long things will take. Even with the grievances we were talking about with telework, my best guess was 6 to 9 months on average. Right. We don't know how long that will truly. It could be shorter, it could be longer. We talked about legislative action that we just won in retirement cases. That took over 20 years. Don't want 20 years. I mean, I don't want to scare anybody with that. But you got to be in for the long haul. And so we don't think we're going to get immediate answers on some of this. But again, I also think the atmosphere can change that could also impact some of this. Yeah. So, you know, if in 6 months from now they realize that people are standing around, they don't have desks, and we can't get space for 2 years at a time, or, gee, we were more efficient doing telework than this, which we think we can show, right. Attitudes may change, or there may be more agencies that are given flexibilities to go back to what was. We're going to still keep pushing all our fights. But every case is going to be so unique. I can't give you an exact number.
And one thing I think we can count on is that when we win at whatever level, the administration is going to appeal. I mean, they're going to push, I think, every decision that doesn't go in their favor to the next round.
I think you are smart in your conclusion there. We're seeing that with the probationary employees. So we know there's been multiple lawsuits, multiple judges that said the termination of the probationary employees was illegal and ordered agencies to bring them back. We know this administration has already gone to the Supreme Court to try and stop that. So we're going to have to see, where these cases go. Now, again, some of these things are orders, but these were temporary restraining orders. There's also cases behind those as well. So you may have a win here, or a change here, but then there's still a case.
Right.
So you got to pay attention to the details, and we'll try to keep people as apprised about this as we can. Understanding lawsuits are very technical, mm-hmm. and we'll try to, just give you the facts so you understand and can follow along.
Okay. And on that, we will take a 2-minute break.
Just 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Welcome back. And we have 2 final questions. The first one is, how can we personally play a role in helping protect our jobs and the union?
So I think that's a really excellent question, because what that does is tells me that our members understand they have a role to play here. Well, I appreciate the number of questions we got about striking. And let me again reiterate, strikes are illegal. We don't want anybody losing their job over that. But I want you to take that energy and invest it in yourself, your family, and your friends. And that's by standing up and fighting with us. And so we talked about a number of things you can do. First of all, make sure you're a member. Obviously, everybody should be members on the call, but you can encourage your colleagues who aren't members to join.
Yes.
Get active in your local chapter. Sometimes I receive reports that, I don't hear enough from my local chapter, or they're not doing this or that. They need help. They need people to step up and help them deliver some of this. And so I encourage you to get involved, become a steward, sit on the board of directors, help guide the chapter. Get involved legislatively.
Yes.
Send letters. Don't worry about people not knowing enough about the information. Call. People say to me, I only talk to a staffer. Staffers do a lot of work for the congressional people. Don't discount them. Yes. They're the worker bees. Send a letter, call. Did you get my letter? What do you think about my letter? Are you going to support me? Call again. Stop by for coffee when they're back at their district. When you walk in that front door to your congressman or senator, they should say, hey, Terry. They know you by your first name. Then you know you're making progress. Let them know you're a federal employee and a constituent in their district. Stand up and stand together. Do not shrink. Do not feel alone. We are in this union together. We stand together. Go to a rally. We're going to be launching an action calendar on days that we can do things like solidarity, where we have T-shirts we match, or a rally you go to, or a letter writing campaign. Take your colleagues out to the parking lot and send letters to your congressmen and senators together. Think of ways we can do things that brings us together and fights back, because our resistance is what we need to show. And we can do that stronger together. Nobody is alone. They want you to feel alone because that makes you feel weak. We are not weak and we are not alone. And so I want everybody to be out there thinking about how important it is to be a federal employee, how important it is to have a union in the workplace, how important it is to have a contract that you can count on, and how important it is that you have a federal government that has your back because you have their back. And that's the future that we have to be fighting for. So yes, everybody should get engaged and start doing things because not one person can do it alone, but together we can move mountains. And I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yes. Last question. What has been the biggest challenge NTEU has faced with respect to the new administration?
So before I answer that, I'm going to ask you to answer that.
Biggest challenge. The biggest challenge has been reminding employees and having them believe in what they're told. This administration lives on telling the same story or lies over and over and over again. And if you're tuning into that, if you tune into it too long, you begin to buy into it. I tell people all the time, watch the news long enough to be informed, but not long enough to be conformed. Because if you're listening and you're hearing that same thing, it's working on you emotionally, mentally, physically, it's working on you. So we watch it long enough to get or hear whatever it is that they're saying. But then when you come to us, trust me, we have your best interests at hand, and our job is to try and give you what you need, arm you with what you need. But it's important to know that from the very bottom to the very top, from the top to the very bottom, we are all in this thing together, and we gotta stay focused and gotta have the right mindset. It's okay to be fearful, it's okay to be scared, but you have to make up in your mind that you're going to use that fear to your advantage and not to your disadvantage.
Yeah, I agree with you, Terry. You know, the challenges we face is really setting the record straight. There's so many false narratives out there and just blatant lies about the federal workforce, about federal unions, about the work that needs to be done for this country. And so our challenge has been to break through that noise and get the record straight with the facts. We need to focus on the facts. We need to be proud of our narrative and our story and share it widely. And we need to stand up for one another. And we need to make sure that we have a Congress that stands up for the American people and for the federal employees that service them. And we need to communicate with each other. And so tonight was our attempt to try and reach out to the largest group of people we've ever reached out to. Now, I know we've had some kinks along the way, but I want everybody to know that our goal is always with you at heart and to making sure you are aware of all of the things that are happening in our union on your behalf. The fight is happening every day, whether you hear it or not. We are going to work tirelessly to get the messages out to you. But know that we all must step up to the plate. And I do not want this administration to underestimate you, to vilify you, to weaken you. Because 35 plus years working in the federal government, some of my greatest friends are in the federal government. We care deeply about one another and the work we do. We have to rely on each other, and now more than ever, we have to stand together, stronger than ever before, and fight the battle ahead for a better outcome. So while this administration has some plans for us, we have to rise to that challenge and see it through. And I have no doubt that when we work together, we will accomplish that. So thank you for tuning in tonight and spending your valuable time with us.
Thank you very much. And just remember, I am my brother's keeper. We are each other's keeper. So let's stay in this fight together. Thank you.
So I think, just for a message for everybody, that this is recorded.
Yes.
And what day was it? It should
It'll
be available?
be out by Friday. It'll be out by Friday.
So if you know of people who aren't able to spend their night with us tonight, or if you want to share it in a lunch and learn or something of that nature, although a 2-hour span is a little bit, you could break it up in segments.
Lunches.
We should have it on our website available to you on Friday. And again, I just want to thank everybody involved. Thank you for being members of NTEU. Thank you to our leaders out there. Thank you for standing strong together. We will get through this stronger than ever. Thank you and have a great night.